My name is Leo, and my neighbor Mr. Holloway has been watering the asphalt for 11 years. I bought this house in the summer of 2015. The first thing I noticed about the neighborhood was how quiet it was. The second thing I noticed was the old man next door, standing in his driveway every single night at exactly 9:15 p.m., holding a garden hose with a brass nozzle, spraying a steady stream of water onto the street. Not the lawn, not the flowers, the street, the blacktop. He would stand there for exactly 45 minutes, moving the hose in a slow, deliberate arc back and forth, like he was painting an invisible line. I asked my real estate agent about it. She laughed nervously and said, "Mr. Holloway is particular, but he's harmless." I accepted that. For 11 years, I accepted it. We never spoke. He was a tall, thin man with skin like old paper and eyes that never seemed to blink. He wore the same gray cardigan every night, regardless of the weather. I'd wave. He'd stare. The water would arc. That was our relationship. Last month, my wife and I had a baby, a little girl. We named her Iris, and that's when the watering stopped. The first night we brought Iris home from the hospital, I was standing by the nursery window at 9:15 p.m., rocking her gently. I looked out toward Holloway's house out of habit. He was standing in his driveway, but the hose was off. He was just standing there, holding the limp hose in one hand, staring directly at my nursery window. He stayed that way for 45 minutes, motionless, staring. The next night, same thing. And the next. My wife didn't notice. She was exhausted. I didn't tell her. I told myself I was being paranoid. On the fifth night, I went outside. I walked across the property line and stood about 10 feet from him. The streetlight buzzed overhead. "Mr. Holloway," I said, "is everything okay? You've been staring at my house." He turned his head slowly. His lips were cracked and dry. When he spoke, his voice sounded like gravel rolling downhill. "The ground is thirsty," he said, "but not for water anymore." I took a step back. "What does that mean?" "You brought something new to the street," he said. "Something small, something soft. The ground can taste her, through the foundation, through the roots." He pointed his brass nozzle toward my house. "I used to keep it asleep with the water, the sound, the vibration. It liked the wet. But now it smells milk. It smells new life. Water won't satisfy it anymore." I told him he was scaring me. I told him to stay away from my house. He just nodded. "It's already under your house, Leo. It's been under all the houses for 100 years. I've been feeding it water so it wouldn't wake up hungry. But you brought a baby home. A baby's breath is sweet. It can smell her through the floorboards." I went inside. I locked every door. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I went into the basement. I'd never really looked at the basement floor before. It was just concrete. But that morning, I noticed a crack running from the foundation wall all the way to the center of the room. And coming out of that crack was a single, thin, pale root. It wasn't a tree root. It was smooth and white, like a tendon. And it was pulsing. I grabbed a hatchet. I chopped the root. It didn't snap. It screamed. A high, wet, piercing shriek that came from the earth itself. And from upstairs I heard Iris start to cry. Not a hungry cry, but a terrified, matching shriek. I ran upstairs. Iris was fine in her crib, but her face was turned toward the window. And outside, standing in my backyard now, was Mr. Holloway. He was holding a shovel, and he was digging a hole directly in line with the nursery. I banged on the window. He looked up. He shook his head slowly. "You shouldn't have cut it," he mouthed through the glass. "Now it's going to come up to find her." I haven't left the house in 3 days. I've covered the nursery floor with salt. I've hung iron nails above the crib. I don't know if any of it works. But last night at 9:15 p.m., I heard the sound of water again. I looked outside. Mr. Holloway was back in his driveway, spraying the street. But he wasn't spraying water anymore. The liquid coming out of that hose was thick and black, like oil. And it was moving against the slope of the street, uphill, toward my foundation. He looked at my window one last time, and I saw his lips move. Feeding time.
My name is Marcus, and I share my bedroom wall with someone who shouldn't exist. I live in a narrow row house in the old part of the city. Brick walls, creaky floors, the kind of place where you can hear your neighbor's television if they turn it up too loud. My neighbor on the shared wall side is a woman named Delia. She's in her 70s, widow, never had children. She's lived in that house for 50 years. She's friendly enough, in a distant sort of way. We chat over the fence. She gives me tomatoes from her garden. I shovel her walkway in the winter. About a year ago, I started hearing something in the wall. At first, I thought it was mice, scratching. But the scratching had a rhythm to it. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch, 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 like someone tapping out a message. I pressed my ear to the plaster one night. The scratching stopped. Then, after a long silence, I heard breathing. Slow, deliberate. Right on the other side of the wall, at the exact height of my pillow. I went over to Delia's house the next day. I asked her if she'd heard any noises in her walls. She gave me a strange look and said, "That's just the house settling, dear." But the noises got worse. I started hearing humming, a low, tuneless hum that vibrated through the plaster. It always started at 2 a.m. and stopped at 4 a.m. Exactly 2 hours, every night. I couldn't take it anymore. I borrowed a borescope camera from a buddy who does home inspections. It's a little camera on the end of a flexible cable. I drilled a tiny hole in my bedroom wall, just big enough for the cable, and fed it through. The feed came up on my phone. At first, I just saw the backside of Delia's drywall, but there was a gap, a space between the walls that shouldn't have been there. It was maybe 18 inches wide, and in that space, there was a mattress. A thin, stained mattress pressed up against the studs. And on the mattress, there was a man. He was old, ancient, naked except for a pair of filthy underwear. His skin was gray and waxy. His hair was long and matted. He was lying on his side, facing my wall, and he was humming. I pulled the camera out so fast I cut my hand on the drywall. I sat on my bedroom floor, shaking. Who was he? How long had he been there? Had Delia been hiding him? Feeding him? I called the police. 2 officers came. I showed them the hole. They looked at each other, then went next door. Delia answered. She was calm. She let them in. 20 minutes later, the officers came back out. One of them, a sergeant with tired eyes, knocked on my door. "Sir," he said, "there's no space between those walls. We checked. It's solid brick. There's no mattress. There's no man." "You're wrong," I said. "I saw him. I heard him humming." "Mrs. Delia is very old," the sergeant said slowly. "She lives alone. She's lived alone for 50 years. There's no one in her house but her." They left. I didn't sleep in my bedroom that night. I slept on the couch. At 2 a.m., the humming started again, louder this time. And it wasn't coming from my bedroom wall anymore. It was coming from the ceiling. directly above the couch. I looked up. There was a small access panel to the attic. The humming was coming from behind it. I stood on a chair and pushed the panel open. I shone my phone light into the dark attic. And there he was, the gray man, sitting cross-legged on the insulation, staring down at me with milky, blind eyes. He was holding something in his lap. It was my wallet, the one I'd lost 3 weeks ago. He held up the wallet and smiled. His teeth were filed into points. "You've been feeding me for years, Marcus," he whispered. His voice was the same low hum I'd heard every night. "Your heat, your breath, your dreams. Delia gave me the house, but you gave me you." I slammed the panel shut. I drove to a motel. I haven't been back. I put the house up for sale. Yesterday, I got a call from my real estate agent. She said there was a problem with the inspection. They found something in the attic, something old. The police are involved now. They want to talk to me, but I'm not going back. Because last night, in this motel room, I woke up at 2 a.m. and I heard humming, coming from the wall next to my bed. He followed me.